The Princes of Wales. Georgian and Windsor. On September 9, 2022, one day after his mother died and he became monarch, King Charles III made the announcement that he was creating his son and heir, William, Prince of Wales. This ancient title harkens back to the 1100s, when the native Welsh dynasty of Aberfraw first consolidated power in the region. A century later, it was stolen by the King of England and granted to his son. In the ensuing 7.5 centuries, the title has been passed down the line of heirs to the English and then British throne. In this 3-part series, we will meet the 29 men who have held the title Prince of Wales. In the previous 2 episodes, we met the 6 native Welsh princes and the medieval Tudor and Stuart English princes. Today we'll get to know the princes of the Georgian and Windsor Dynasties, including one who fought so fiercely with his father that only his untimely death ended their feud, and another who stole the Prince of Wales' coronet when he left the country. Finally, we'll explore the current prince's ties to the country of Wales and modern calls for the title to be relinquished by the British royal family and returned to the Welsh people. In 1714, Queen Anne died childless, and the throne went to her nearest Protestant relative, her second cousin, George I. He was the Elector of Hanover in Germany, didn't speak a word of English, and had little interest in his new kingdom. His son, George Augustus, was created Prince of Wales at 31. He was far more enthusiastic about becoming monarch of the powerful kingdom. He claimed that he had not a drop of blood in his veins that was not English. His parents had a terrible marriage. Both were unfaithful, but it was his mother, Sophia Dorothea of Celle, who was imprisoned and kept from her children. George Sr. didn't want his son forced into a loveless arranged marriage, so he allowed him to travel Europe to select his own bride. He wed intelligent and charming Caroline of Ansbach, and they did have a happy marriage. But the prince resented his father for his treatment of his mother, and the pair never got along. The king refused to share political power with his son until he died in 1727. George II was crowned at 47. His eldest son, Frederick Louis, was born in Hanover, while his parents took their younger children with them when they moved to London. 7-year-old Frederick was left behind to represent the family in Hanover. He did not see his parents again for 14 years. George finally called his son to London after inheriting the throne. Upon his arrival, Frederick was created Prince of Wales. He ordered a new golden coronet for himself at the cost of £140, 5 shillings. This coronet was used for the next several generations. The long separation had caused a rift with his parents. By the time the prince rejoined the family, he was fond of drinking, gambling, and women, and the king and queen had little patience for him. Frederick set up his own court in opposition to his father's, and challenged and badmouthed him at every opportunity. George looked into ways of disinheriting his prodigal son in favor of his second son, Prince George, but the succession laws were ironclad. He settled for cutting Frederick's allowance and keeping him out of politics. The prince nearly married English aristocrat Lady Diana Spencer, 7 times great-aunt of the Lady Diana Spencer Charles, Prince of Wales, married in 1981. Her family offered the indebted prince a £100,000 dowry, but the king vetoed the nuptials and ordered his son to wed 16-year-old German princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha instead. The couple got on well and the marriage settled the prince, but he continued to wage war with his father. When George fell ill, Frederick started a rumor that the king's death and his own accession were imminent. George roused himself from his sickbed to dispel the rumors. When Augusta went into labor with their first child, Frederick got her out of bed in the middle of the night and forced her into a bumpy carriage ride to a different palace so that his parents would not be able to attend the birth. Royal deliveries were usually witnessed by the court to ensure a sickly royal child was not swapped with a healthy commoner baby. Frederick's mother was relieved that her grandchild was merely a girl and therefore could not have been a changeling. Frederick and Augusta had 9 children, and the prince was a devoted father. He was a music lover and played the viola and cello. He set up a rival opera house in opposition to his parents' royal opera conducted by Friedrich Handel. The prince wrote a play which was so terrible that the theater had to refund the tickets and quell a riot. After the flop, Frederick stuck to patronizing other, more talented artists. He commissioned the composition Rule Britannia, one of the UK's most popular patriotic songs. He also enjoyed decorating his palaces in the Rococo style, designing the gardens at Kew Palace, and was an enthusiastic supporter of the new sport of cricket. A number of towns in the American colonies were named in his honor, most notably Fredericksburg, Virginia. At 44, Frederick died suddenly. His demise was long attributed to a burst lung abscess caused by a blow from a cricket or tennis ball, but it is now thought to have been from a pulmonary embolism. He was the most recent Prince of Wales, never to have acceded to the throne. A month after his death, his 13-year-old son, George William Frederick, was named the new Prince of Wales. He had been born a month prematurely and was not expected to live, but he grew strong and intelligent. He was well versed in politics by the age of 8 and was the first future British king to formally study science. His grandfather paid him little attention while his father was alive, but once George was Prince of Wales, the king took him under his wing. George II lived another 9 years. He died in 1722, age 77, while on the toilet. George III took the throne at 22. He wed German Princess Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, and the pair had a happy, faithful marriage and 15 children. His eldest son, George Augustus Frederick, was named Prince of Wales at just a week old. He was a talented student with a gift for languages. At 18, he was given his own household. He had a zest for life and used his newfound freedom to drink heavily and pursue numerous mistresses and escapades. He became infatuated with a Catholic commoner, Maria Fitzherbert. The prince secretly married her, even though the union was illegal without the king's permission. George's extravagant lifestyle caught up with him, and he was heavily in debt. His upright father, who was horrified by his decadent behavior, refused to bail him out, unless he left Maria and took a royal bride, his cousin Caroline of Brunswick. George and Caroline did their duty and produced one child, Charlotte, who was born exactly 9 months after the wedding. But they hated each other, separated, and each took up with their own lovers. King George III imposed the Enclosures Act, impoverishing the common people, lost the American Revolution, and saw his fellow monarch, Louis XVI, lose his head in the French Revolution. In the midst of a tumultuous reign, the king began suffering serious mental illness at the age of 50. He talked incessantly, foamed at the mouth, and rampaged through the palace, terrifying his family. The Prince of Wales was named regent while his father was incapacitated. He was thrilled to finally have something to do, but spent most of his time bickering with Parliament. Prince George was hated for his expensive lifestyle, while the nation lived under austerity during the Napoleonic Wars. The country's hopes for the future were embodied in his only legitimate child, Charlotte, the beautiful and moderate princess, and her handsome husband, Prince Leopold, were the Will and Kate of their day. But all hope was dashed when she died in childbirth at 21. The entire country mourned the tragedy. King George went in and out of lucidity for 30 years. When he was ill, the Prince Regent reigned in his place. In 1798, Ireland rebelled but was defeated. Parliament signed the 1800 Act of Union, making Ireland an official part of the country, renamed the United Kingdom. In 1807, George III signed the act abolishing slavery in the British Empire. He then sunk completely into madness, never to recover. His son took over as Prince Regent from 1811 to 1820, a period known as the Regency. George III died in 1820, age 81. King George IV threw himself an extravagant and perversely expensive coronation. When his estranged wife showed up to be crowned queen, he ordered the doors of Westminster Abbey slammed in her face. He spent gobs of money on parties, food, and renovating his palaces. Aside from existing while Wellington and Nelson won the Napoleonic Wars, his reign was detested by his people. After yet another massive meal, washed down with copious quantities of alcohol, he died at 67. Neither George IV nor his brother William IV had a legitimate heir during their reign, so there was no Prince of Wales until the birth of their niece, Queen Victoria's eldest son, Albert Edward. He was created Prince of Wales at 1 month old. Bertie, as he was known in the family, struggled to meet his parents' lofty expectations, but he had an abundance of charm and sociability. At 19, he toured North America and met President James Buchanan. He hoped to pursue a military career based on his own merit, but his mother vetoed this, and instead he was given the honorary rank of colonel. He attended the universities of Edinburgh and Oxford, where, away from his parents, he enjoyed education very much. At Oxford, he had an affair with an actress, Nellie Clifton. When his upright parents learned of his youthful indiscretion, they were horrified. Prince Albert jumped on the next train to reprimand his son. Albert died of typhoid fever 2 weeks later, and Victoria blamed Bertie for his death. In her eyes, he would never measure up to his saintly father. To get him under control, she arranged a marriage to the beautiful Princess Alexandra of Denmark. The couple got along well and had 6 children. She was willing to look the other way, while the prince carried on affairs with at least 55 mistresses. He tried to be discreet and never acknowledged any illegitimate children, but he was embroiled in scandal when he was compelled to testify in the divorce trial of one of his lovers. The Prince and Princess of Wales had a dazzling social life, throwing glittering balls at Marlborough House and setting the trend for lavish country house parties at Sandringham. Edward was an arbiter of fashion, popularized tweed, Homburg hats, Norfolk jackets, and black tie for formal occasions. He introduced the new tradition of Sunday roasts of beef and potatoes with horseradish sauce, and all of those Yorkshire puddings added a few pounds to the royal waistline. So he also popularized the tradition of men not doing the bottom button of their waistcoats. The Queen blocked her son from government affairs and disagreed with his liberal ideas. He was empathetic to the poor, pushed for social reform and public housing. He spoke out against racism, but he did agree with his mother that women should not have the vote. Edward was popular with the people. He pioneered the royal public appearance so important to the monarchy today. Edward's eldest son, Prince Albert Victor, was a playboy like his old man and was also embroiled in scandal. But he died at 28 during an influenza pandemic, and his younger brother, George Frederick Ernst Albert, moved up to second in line. Both he and his older brother had struggled academically and were sent into the Navy to be educated and travel the world. George grew into a stiff, strict and dull man. He served under his uncle, Prince Alfred, in Malta and fell in love with his daughter, Marie, but she rejected his proposal and instead married the King of Romania. Prince Albert Victor had been engaged to Princess Mary of Teck. When he died, George took his place at the altar as well. The couple fell in love and were devoted and faithful to each other. They had 5 sons and a daughter. George held the title Duke of York until the death of his grandmother, Queen Victoria, in 1901. His father had been Prince of Wales for 59 years, the longest of anyone at that point. He became King Edward VII, and 10 months later he named his 36-year-old son Prince of Wales. Because the coronet created for Prince Frederick in 1728 was in such disrepair, a new coronet was made. George held the title until 1910, when Edward VII died and he became King George V. Just over a month after his accession, he named his son, Edward Albert Christian George Andrew Patrick David, Prince of Wales, on his 16th birthday. He was tutored at the palace and then sent into the Navy, which he did not enjoy. Welsh politician David Lloyd George encouraged the king to hold an official investiture ceremony for his son at Carnarvon Castle in Wales. This was an interesting choice of venue, as Carnarvon was one of the fortresses built by Edward I to suppress the Welsh people. Thus, Edward was the first English Prince of Wales to be invested in Wales. Lloyd George invented a fanciful ceremony in the style of a Welsh pageant and coached Edward to speak a few words in Welsh. The prince attended Oxford University and excelled in polo, but not in academics. He left after 4 years without a degree. World War I broke out when he was 20, and he was eager to fight. But the British government refused to put the heir to the throne in harm's way. David visited troops at the front, earned his pilot's license, and became popular with veterans. He had an affair with courtesan Marguerite Alibert, who, years later, shot and killed her husband. The palace worked desperately to keep the prince's name out of the papers during her spectacular murder trial. In the 1920s, the prince took on numerous royal duties and overseas trips. His good looks, style, and active romantic life made him a celebrity. He supported the rights of workers, but also held racist views. He preferred partying to work, and his parents and the government were deeply concerned about his future as sovereign. His younger brother Bertie settled down and started a family, but Edward continued to womanize into his 40s. He fell hard for American Wallis Simpson. When they met, she was married to her second husband. Her strong personality dominated his, and he lavished jewels upon her. In 1936, King George V died, and the 41-year-old prince became King Edward VIII. He refused to take his job seriously, and ministers were reluctant to send classified documents to him for fear that Wallis would leak them. She was sleeping with a German ambassador. Edward was determined to marry Wallis, but the church could not condone him marrying a divorcee, and the government could not have a Nazi sympathizer as queen. The prime minister gave Edward an ultimatum: give up Wallis or give up the throne. Edward announced his abdication to a shocked public just 11 months after his ascension. He became Duke of Windsor, while his younger brother became King George VI. Edward stole the Prince of Wales' coronet and brought it with him to France, where he married Wallis. The couple went to Germany to meet Hitler and were a thorn in the side of the British government and the royal family as they struggled through World War II. George VI had 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. Because she was a girl and could technically be displaced in the line of succession if her father ever had a legitimate son, Elizabeth was never heir apparent, only heir presumptive. Therefore, she was not given the title Princess of Wales. She became Queen Elizabeth II in 1952. Her son, Charles Philip Arthur George, was 3 when he became heir to the throne. His parents were often away performing royal duties, and Charles was left with his grandmother, to whom he grew close. At 8, he was sent to school with other children, breaking the tradition of princes being tutored at the palace. At 9, his mother created him Prince of Wales by letters patent. His father enrolled him in the Spartan boarding school, Gordonston, to toughen him up. Other students ostracized the prince. Next, he was sent to Cambridge University. He hated how little choice he was given in life. Even his friends were selected for him. He spent a semester abroad in Australia and another in Wales, where he learned the basics of the Welsh language, ahead of his televised investiture ceremony as Prince of Wales in 1969. Since the subjugation in 1282, the general feeling in Wales towards the title being held by the descendants of their conquerors was acceptance or even pride that the title was held in such esteem by the royal family. But in the mid-20th century, there was an increase in enthusiasm for the native Welsh language and culture, and a rise in Welsh nationalism and even calls for independence. Many protested Charles's investiture. Nevertheless, the ceremony went ahead. Because the Duke of Windsor still had the old coronet, a new one was created. This very modern crown includes interpretive fleur-de-lis, diamonds in the shape of a Scorpio for Charles's birthday, and an actual electroplated ping-pong ball for the mound. During the ceremony, the Queen placed the coronet on Charles's head and robes on his shoulders. He pledged allegiance to her and gave a speech in English and Welsh. When Edward, Duke of Windsor, died in 1972, his Prince of Wales coronet was returned to the royal collection. In his youth, Prince Charles dated around and became smitten with Camilla Shand. The couple were well matched and met each other's families. But when Charles was sent overseas with the Royal Navy, their relationship ended abruptly. This could have been because he was not yet ready to settle down, or because the royal family did not see Camilla as the right sort of aristocratic bride. She instead married Andrew Parker Bowles, and Charles, now in his 30s, was pushed towards Lady Diana Spencer. She was 13 years his junior, beautiful, demure, and the daughter of the Earl of Spencer. Their wedding was the event of the century and watched by 750 million people worldwide. Diana was in awe of her suitor's royal position, but the two never made a genuine romantic connection. It was clear that they had little in common. The couple argued often, and Diana suffered depression and eating disorders. They had 2 sons, William and Harry. Charles soon reconnected with Camilla, and Diana, lonely and dealing with constant scrutiny from the press and the royal family, had affairs of her own. Diana was much more popular than Charles, so when the trouble in their marriage came to light, he and Camilla got all the blame. They divorced in 1996. A year later, Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris and was mourned deeply. Charles, now a single parent, did his best to raise his children as their mother had wanted. In 2005, Charles and Camilla married, though she was technically a Princess of Wales. Because the title was so associated with Diana, Camilla used the lesser title, Duchess of Cornwall. Charles was Prince of Wales for 64 years, longer than anyone else. He was a patron of over 400 charities, with particular interest in the environment and climate change. In 2022, Queen Elizabeth died, and he succeeded to the throne as King Charles III. The following day, during his first address as sovereign, he created his 40-year-old son, William Arthur Philip Louis, the new Prince of Wales. This was the fastest the title has ever been transferred. William was born in 1982 and was the first heir to be delivered in a hospital rather than a palace. His mother insisted on raising him herself rather than handing him off to nannies. She sent him to school with other children, took him to McDonald's, Disney World, homeless shelters, and AIDS clinics to expose him to life outside the palace. he attended elite boys' boarding school, Eton College, where he studied the Welsh language and captained the water polo team. He took a gap year to teach children in Chile and visit Africa. Next, he attended the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. There, he began dating Catherine Middleton, a fellow student who caught his eye while walking the runway in a charity fashion show. William attended the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. In 2011, he married Catherine at Westminster Abbey. The star-studded event was watched by 300 million people worldwide. The newlyweds were created Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. For the first 3 years of their marriage, they lived a quiet life on the island of Anglesey in Wales, where William served as a search and rescue helicopter pilot in the Royal Air Force. In 2013, prior to the birth of the couple's first child, a new Succession to the Crown Act changed the old rule of male preference primogeniture, which put brothers ahead of sisters in the line of succession. Now, under absolute primogeniture, the firstborn child of the monarch, whatever their gender, will be heir apparent and Prince or Princess of Wales. Catherine delivered a son, George, in 2013. A daughter, Charlotte, followed in 2015, and another son, Louis, in 2018. In 2017, William retired from the Navy to focus on his many royal duties, diplomatic tours, and patronship of dozens of charitable causes. The moment William became heir apparent to the throne, he inherited from his father the Duchy of Cornwall, a land trust worth over £1 billion. The next day, he was created Prince of Wales. Weeks after, William and Catherine visited Anglesey and Swansea. While their presence was welcome by many, it was also met with protests. A petition calling for the title Prince of Wales to be abolished got over 28,000 signatures. It is unlikely that the royal family will stage an investiture ceremony for William like the one his father had in 1969, for fear of provoking the Welsh people to call for an end to the title Prince of Wales, or even independence from the United Kingdom. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.